And for the record, my name is Sharon Durkin, District 8 City Councilor, and I'm the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Planning, Development, and Transportation. Today is July 8th, 2024. In accordance with Chapter 2 of the 2023 Acts modifying certain requirements of open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, including the requirement for that public bodies conduct its meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public, the City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually via Zoom. This hearing is being recorded. It is also being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, FiOS Channel 964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.plandev@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all counselors. Again, that email is ccc.plandev@boston.gov. Public testimony will be taken at the end of the hearing. Individuals will be called on in the order for which they are signed up, and they will have 2 minutes to testify. If you wish to sign up for public testimony and have not done so, please email our Central Staff Liaison, Shane Pack, at shane, shane, .pac@boston.gov for the Zoom link, and your name will be added to the list. Today's hearing is on docket 0357, order for a hearing to discuss the possibility of congestion pricing in Boston. This matter was sponsored by Councilor Tanya Fernandez Anderson and was referred to the committee on February 14, 2024. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues in order of arrival, Councilor Tanya Fernandez Anderson, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Aaron Murphy, Councilor Fitzgerald, Councilor Worrell, and Councilor Gigi Coletta Zapata. Sorry, let me write that down. A little bit slow to the, okay. So I'd like to give this to the lead sponsor first. So Councilor Tanya Fernandez Anderson, you have 3 minutes to give an opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to first thank Vineet Gupta, Director of Transportation Policy and Planning, for being here, as well as my panelist, Michael Manville, Professor and Chair of Urban Planning, UCLA. Sorry, can I get it corrected on that name? How do you pronounce it?
Thanks, it's Tegan Tyke. You're very, very close.
Oh, good, okay. Ms. Tyke, Executive Director, Central Transportation Planning Staff, Boston Regional Metropolitan Planning Organization. Jared Johnson, Executive Director, Transit Matters. Addie Tomer, is it Tomer? Senior Fellow, Brookings Institute. Is that everyone here? Except except the last panelist. I just thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule for being here. Really looking forward to this conversation. Madam Chair, again, thank you, and to your staff for working with our office to ensure that we hold a thoughtful, sensitive hearing on a topic which has seen a lot of attention in recent years, given our time constraints. I hope to keep my remarks brief and focused on our panel. This council knows all too well the issue on congestion in Boston. We rank among the worst cities in the country when it comes to traffic. Despite some relief during the pandemic, traffic congestion in Boston quickly rebounded, and with fewer people taking public transportation than pre-COVID, we undoubtedly have more cars on the streets now. This not only poses a problem when it comes to congestion, but also represents a threat to pedestrian safety and air quality, particularly in neighborhoods like mine in Roxbury, which already experience devastating impacts as a result of climate change. This will be the first time that Boston City Council, and by extension the administration, will hear on the subject of congestion pricing in Boston. Our goal for the hearing is to define what congestion pricing can look like with the understanding that the congestion pricing is not a one-size-fits-all policy proposal. We will not be focusing on merits of congestion pricing as the quality of a proposal that like this has been discussed over and over in print, online, and television. Instead, this hearing hopefully we will unpack some important questions. If Boston were implemented congestion pricing, what would it look like? What would the burden on administration look like, and would be most impacted, or who would be most impacted? Congestion pricing means many things to different people. In this hearing, we hope to get a better understanding of what a policy for Boston could do and how it would look. So again, thank you so much. Looking forward to a robust conversation, and thank you to my colleagues for attending.
Thank you so much, Counselor. And without objection, I was going to let the panelists introduce themselves before we get into questioning from my colleagues and opening statements. So first I will pass it to Vineet Gupta, the Director of Transportation Policy and Planning for the Streets Cabinet. Second will be Michael Manville, Professor and Chair of Urban Planning at UCLA. Third will be Addie Tomer, Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institute. Fourth will be Jared Johnson, Executive Director at Transit Matters. Fifth will be Tegan Teish, Executive Director of the Central Transportation Planning Staff, Boston Region Metro Planning Organization. And sorry if I got any of your titles or names incorrect, but so we'll give you each 2 to 3 minutes to give an opening statement. Feel free to take less if needed.
Sure, thank you. I can spend my 3 to 5 minutes just kind of being my introduction as well as my statement, if that's okay. So thank you for convening this hearing. Particularly thank you, Councillor Tanya Fernandez-Anderson, for bringing this topic to the fore and making it a topic of conversation for all of us to think through. We really appreciate that. I'm going to let the experts who follow me get into the details, but I do want to start by saying that the administration is currently not actively pursuing congestion pricing in Boston, but we are very interested in the topic, and we'll continue to learn and see what policies can emerge. Having said that, there were 3 things that I wanted to kind of emphasize, which are fairly general in nature. First, I think it's really important for us to understand the problem we are trying to solve. Where exactly are we experiencing congestion? We know that congestion is just not a local issue in Boston, it's a regional issue. It's an issue that has to do with regional traffic as much as anything else. If it's a regional issue, the solution also has to be regional in nature. And for that reason, we are very interested in following the deliberations of the governor's transportation funding task force and see what direction that takes. The second thing that I wanted to kind of emphasize on is that congestion pricing, and I think Councillor, you mentioned this, congestion pricing is just one of the many tools that we have available to address congestion. So this is as much about mode shift and time shift as it is about having tolls or cordon pricing. The focus really has to be on moving towards more efficient and easily available and accessible public transportation. Note that cities like London, where congestion pricing has been implemented fairly successfully, a majority of those funds that they collect all go towards improving bus service in the city proper. So public transportation and improving public transportation is a huge part of the solution here. The other piece is time shift, which is that we have to have a solution that distributes traffic throughout the day as much as possible so that it's not a peak time problem. And that in turn would reduce congestion at any given time. So congestion pricing is one of many tools. There are others that are available in the planner's toolbox. We've talked about most of them statewide. For example, we've talked about, this is getting a little technical here, but we've talked about pricing on vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. And this is something that is being researched on, is being looked at. We've talked about having tolls on highways. This is what California does today. They have, which is again, reflecting what time of the day to distribute to lessen congestion at peak time. And then of course, locally, we could also talk about increasing the cost of parking, which is again, another tool that's used extensively throughout the world. So I just thought I'd kind of cover all those things, but I've saved the most important for last, and that has to do with equity. Whatever solution we adopt, whatever process we take moving forward, we want to make sure that our low income and our most vulnerable populations are not impacted disproportionately. And so a lot of this will have to do in the exact specifics of what the programs might be to address congestion. But underlying all of that is we don't want to hurt the very people who we are trying to help. So with that, I can kind of hand it over to for others to follow up.
Thank you so much, Director Gupta. Now I'll pass it to Professor Manville.
Thank you, everybody. Pleasure to be here remotely. I'll just say a few things. I've studied congestion pricing for some time now. I'm going to echo what the previous speaker said a little bit, in that I do think it's important to remember that it's called, the policy is called congestion pricing for a reason. The main thing it does is reduce traffic congestion. It can do some other things in terms of co-benefits, like it might get you some mode shift, it might reduce pollution and GHGs, it probably will. It might raise you some revenue, but these are not the main goals of this policy. The policy is there to reduce traffic congestion. That's what it does best, and if you have other goals that are more important to you, there are probably other policy instruments that will do that better. And I think that's also important to keep in mind, because when the time comes, if the time comes to explain this policy to the public, there's a tendency to view congestion pricing as sort of a penalty for drivers or a punishment for drivers, and that is not what it is. In places that implement congestion pricing successfully, what it does is it makes driving great, right? It provides high quality driving, which is something that most American urban areas cannot provide because they let their roads become congested, right? In exchange for a price, you actually get, for the first time, usually in the history of a city, a high quality, high performance road system. It also gets you a little bit less VMT, a little bit less pollution, a bunch more money, right? But the main thing it does is reduce congestion. And it is the only thing we know of that reduces congestion, if by what you mean by reduced congestion is what most people think of when they think of that term, which is, am I driving faster today at 8 a.m. than I would have been in the absence of these prices? There are many other policies you can implement to address congestion, but they do not necessarily reduce it. An excellent public transportation system lets people avoid congestion. It doesn't reduce congestion. If you ride around Manhattan, right, you do not have to be exposed to the terrible congestion that is above you, but it does not reduce Manhattan's congestion. So a couple other points just to make. The first is that there are a bunch of different ways to do this, right? We hear a lot about cordon charges. That's what New York recently attempted. That's what London has. It's what Milan has. It is not the only way to do it. As the director before me indicated, out here in California, we also use dynamic prices on highways. It is not obvious to me that the best thing for most American cities to do is try and do a cordon charge. Cordon charges are logistically difficult. They're sometimes politically, given the nature of American federalism, a little bit easier to pull off. but they also create a trade-off that I'm happy to talk about more in the Q&A, which is that it isn't obvious that what we want in the heart of American cities is high-speed vehicle travel, right? When you reduce congestion, you let cars go faster. There's ways to deal with that, right? But in most American cities, most of the congestion, most of the delay, and a disproportionate share of the overall driving occur on the freeways. And so pricing freeways makes a lot of sense. I realize the city of Boston doesn't have the authority to do that, but I just want to point that out. A second point is just that the revenue is canonically considered a byproduct of congestion pricing, not its main goal. If you want to raise a lot of revenue, again, there's better ways to do it. They might be politically difficult, but tolls are a very inefficient way to raise money. If you want to do something else and then get some toll revenue on top of it, that's great. If you just need more money for something, there's better fiscal instruments for that. Third, similarly, will congestion pricing reduce pollution and GHGs? Absolutely. Is it the best way to do it? No, right? That's the gas tax. The gas tax is a straight up carbon tax. It's a very important instrument, but it will, congestion pricing has been demonstrated when it's been done to reduce GHG and more importantly to reduce local air pollution, which speaks to, I think, the equity issue associated with it. One of the most harmful effects of traffic congestion is that people who are affluent enough to drive sit on free roads and idle, and they emit very harmful particulate matter, carbon monoxide, benzene, and so forth into neighborhoods that are near congested roads, which are disproportionately populated by people who have lower incomes and are less likely to drive. It's a serious environmental justice issue that congestion pricing does address. The last point I'll make, just continuing on the theme of equity, is that it is absolutely imperative to recognize the fact that a congestion toll would be a regressive charge, and that it could pose serious equity problems. It's also important to recognize that this is a problem that comes with its own solution, right? Because while revenue is not the main goal of congestion pricing, you will raise a lot of revenue. And the way to deal with that equity problem is to take some of that revenue and transfer it to travelers below a certain income level to make them whole. To use the concern of regressivity to sort of suggest that we can't do congestion pricing is inconsistent with the way we approach almost any other public policy issue. I can't think of any other public good or collective service or even private good where our recognition that some people don't have enough money for it leads us to say it should be free for all people, right? We don't make food free for everybody just because some people have trouble affording it. We have food stamps. We can do the same thing with our transportation system and get sort of all the efficiency implied by congestion pricing while also taking care to make sure people are not unduly burdened if they have low incomes or are otherwise vulnerable. I'll stop there. Happy to take your questions. And again, appreciate the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Professor. And now we'll go to A.D. Chomer from the Brookings Institute.
Good afternoon, council members and staff. My name is A.D. Chomer, and I'm a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., where I lead our infrastructure research within our Metropolitan Policy Program. I first want to start by just thanking you all for hosting today's hearing. It's a really important topic at the cutting edge of thought, both globally and certainly now here in the United States. Congestion pricing may be the most impactful transportation policy that no U.S. city has yet tested. Such national hesitancy, though, finally appears to be ending. Cities across the country are now moving beyond debates over the merits of congestion pricing and instead shifting into genuine, thoughtful questions around policy design and implementation. This is a significant and positive development. In that same spirit, I want to use my short time today to focus on what it will take for Boston stakeholders to design and implement a congestion pricing system that uniquely fits your tastes and ambitions. It's important to start with a fundamental truth, many of which Professor Manville and Secretary Gupta have already noted. Congestion pricing is not a one-size-fits-all policy. In fact, many American cities and regions already use a light touch form through variable pricing on highway segments, bridges and tunnels during busy periods. The policy, though, that most are starting to think about, and the one capturing our attention, is what's called cordon or area-wide pricing. That's when it costs a certain amount to enter entire neighborhoods, often in the urban core. But even then, cordons always look different. Looking across the world, I and my peers can confidently tell you that no one approach, cordon or not, is the same. Each place was able to consider a host of variables that stakeholders can use to their benefit, and that same list would apply to a policy program right here in Boston. Size. A policy's geographic area can be drawn to your liking, from a tight business district to one covering multiple square miles. Time. If the goal is to smooth out rush hours, you can only charge during the morning and afternoon peak. If your goal is to reduce car use on weekdays, let's say, you can make weekends free. Time is up to you. Vehicles. Some places charge more for large trucks, others charge less for motorcycles and small vehicles. Cities also have different approaches to taxis and rideshare. Who, and this is the equity point that folks are already starting to bring up. Depending on the underlying technologies used, a city can design a system that addresses economic inequities head on. And it can be more than just those who take transit, but actually those who are dependent drivers finding opportunities to ride affordably for them. Finally, fiscal health. Prices are a dynamic tool for government to use market principles to the public's benefit. Where you then choose to invest those revenues is a transformative opportunity to shape your city's future. Each of these variables I listed matter, but none of them stand alone. It's how you choose to handle them in concert that will determine the shape of traffic in your city and the environmental and safety benefits for all to enjoy. Let me offer two quick examples to demonstrate what I mean. Boston, like most cities, knows that congested highways during rush hour also means traffic shifts to local roads and neighborhoods never intended to handle those pass-through trips. All that unintended local traffic reduces air quality, makes streets less safe as drivers are in a rush, and even disrupts local businesses. A cordon, for example, could be designed to minimize through traffic in your at-risk neighborhoods by keeping more people on the highways during those key times. Truck trips are another area to prioritize, especially since the city is already aiming to reduce diesel emissions. Trucks do not tend to cause congestion in cities. They're a small minority of trips, but they do get stuck in it, leading to higher emissions as they idle at their lower fuel efficiencies. The time and vehicle policies within a geographic area could combine to keep specific areas free-flowing at certain points in the day, while also pushing freight companies and the businesses they serve to use those times for their deliveries. The common theme here is flexibility. In every global city, policymakers like yourself work with outside constituencies and technical experts to design congestion pricing policies that work best for their needs. And while no system is perfect, the trend lines are also clear. Cities and regions with congestion pricing policies experience, well, less congestion, but they also improve their fiscal stability for their transit operations, and they create opportunities to improve roadway safety and livability in the process. It's not often that one kind of policy can deliver so many benefits, honestly for so many, yet still be so customly designed. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Adi. And next we'll go to Jared Johnson from Transit Matters.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Jared Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of Transit Matters. We're a nonprofit that works to better link improve public transit with equity, climate policy, and economic vibrancy. I also want to echo the thanks for the counselors and their staff. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you about the critical need for congestion pricing and some of the ways that we might implement that. I think we all understand the frustrations of gridlock and the environmental and economic toll that it takes on the city, as well as the personal toll that it takes on residents. But I want to make sure that I'm presenting some evidence and sharing some insights that can help us make better informed decisions that can help us prioritize fairness, equity, and safety. First, I want to stress that implementing congestion pricing is not an overnight solution. It's a comprehensive process that can take 7 to 10 years or longer. This timeline gives us ample opportunity to study the impacts thoroughly, particularly on low-income communities, and to develop robust strategies. For example, in New York City, the Community Service Society found that only through their research through the many years that it took to develop New York City's congestion pricing scheme, that only 2% of low-income residents in outer boroughs would be regularly impacted by congestion pricing, while the majority would benefit from increased transit funded by the revenue generated. And as mentioned, congestion pricing isn't unfair to drivers. In fact, it leads to faster commutes and less crowded roads. Implementing congestion pricing is enabling road repairs, but also they put less puts less wear and tear on cars and significantly increases the air quality for communities adjacent to busy arterials. Congestion costs low-income residents the most by increasing their commute times and causing them to miss hours at work or cutting into family time on already long commutes. And again, this obviously impacts bus drivers especially. I also want to make sure that I take a little time to dispel some of the myths about what is the cause of our congestion. And there have been talks about bike lanes or bus lanes or road diets, but really the real issues here are the lack of investment in public transit, the inclusion of excessive parking in such a densely populated city, and single-use zoning that prevents residents from easily walking or rolling to meet their daily needs. And so studies have consistently found that these factors, rather than bike lanes or bus lanes, contribute to traffic congestion. So I just want to stress that inaction is not an option. Every day we delay, we're perpetuating the inequities in our current transportation system, and we risk more injuries, more deaths, in addition to all of the data that we've heard about the cost of congestion. So by committing to a long-term vision that includes congestion pricing, we can create a more equitable and efficient and safe transportation system. The current speed for MBTA buses during peak hours is about 8 miles per hour, which is far below the national average. And this is unacceptable, especially for our low-income residents that rely on public transit. Congestion pricing could not only improve those bus speeds by making roads less congested, but can also be a significant source of revenue for the MBTA, as we've heard. So in conclusion, I urge you all to consider the data presented here with an open mind. I think the benefits of congestion pricing and improved public transit far outweigh the cons. Boston is home to America's first subway. We took down an ugly highway that was dividing residents from the waterfront. So we can do innovative things. We can do big things. And so I think I'm hopeful that in this hearing, we can talk about the ways that we can implement congestion pricing in an equitable way and actually use it to further our goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jared. And last but not least, Tegan Teague from the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Thank you. May I ask a point of clarification? Are we packaging an intro and our testimony talking points together, or will there be a separate time to sort of comment more on some of the topics?
You'll hear questions from my colleagues, but this is a chance for you to give both an opening statement and sort of the direction and introduction of the way that you're approaching this issue.
Okay, all right. So my name is Tegan Tyke. I'm the executive director of the staff to the Boston Region MPO. I know the pronunciation is really tricky, so I appreciate the efforts that everybody is putting into that. We're also known as the Central Transportation Planning Staff. And like others, I'm very excited to have the opportunity to be here today to talk about my agency's, my colleagues' research and work on roadway pricing strategies and implementation in urban areas across the US. But first, just quickly about the Boston Region MPO. We're responsible for the planning, direction, and oversight of the use of federal transportation funds in the 97 cities and towns that include City of Boston that make up our region. We exist as MPOs as a prerequisite to using federal funding in urban areas greater than 200,000 people. So our required work includes developing a long-range vision and plan for transportation in our region, as well as a 5-year capital investment plan for the use of federal funds in our region. So we also have access to and use federal planning funds to study and analyze topics that are central towards working towards the region goals, which include a safe, resilient, and equitable transportation system. So of course, roadway pricing is a really important element of that. We did carry out recently some work that I had hoped to just highlight today. We packaged a report called Learning from Roadway Pricing Experiences. That was a national case study review of different roadway pricing programs. People have talked now about there's a variety of different programs and ways to approach this. We differentiate congestion pricing specifically as a roadway pricing strategy that incorporates variation in pricing based on time of day and demand. So there are tolls and things on highways that do not vary by time of day. So that would not be congestion pricing. That would be a different kind of roadway pricing strategy. We took a look at 5 particular strategies sort of more deeply as part of our work, and we talked to the planners and implementers of those strategies. This included a transportation network provider surcharge in Chicago, which is a surcharge on Uber and Lyft type trips to and from downtown We also looked at 2 versions of tolling lanes at a variable rate. Those include high occupancy toll or hot lanes in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota, and also express lanes in San Francisco. And in those cases, sorry, my cat is meowing and broke his way into the half of the room. In those cases, folks that are higher occupancy, more people in one car, or buses or motorcycles might be able to use those lanes for free. However, people driving solo may be able to use those lanes for a price that may vary throughout the day. We also, of course, looked at the cordon-style strategy that was proposed and planned by New York, in which drivers entering a specific zone would be required to pay a fee that would vary throughout the day. We know that program right now has been indefinitely paused. And lastly, we also looked at a strategy to introduce variable pricing on parking in certain neighborhoods in Washington, D.C. The parking pricing of each spot would vary based on demand. So the prices would change depending on how many spots were available. And that's been in place in DC since 2016. So we found a couple of really major key takeaways from looking at those. Some of these overlap with points already made by other experts here today. So one is that since these could be very challenging to implement, the need to build buy-in throughout the planning and design process of developing this strategy and policy is absolutely essential. Pilot programs can be really helpful with this because they start to show the benefits before getting to the point of full implementation, and that helps increase buy-in. Another method is to be very transparent about the goals and expected outcomes from the beginning. And folks mentioned that goals certainly include reducing congestion. They can also include goals like reinvesting in transportation infrastructure, supporting economic growth, improving air quality, travel reliability or safety, or simply moving more people. And so being upfront about those goals and the expected outcomes can help get more buy-in into the process or the strategy. The policy also has to be aggressive enough if you want it to meet goals. So if the goal is to change behavior and reduce congestion, the pricing has to be high enough. Additionally, good alternatives have to be available. Without both, wealthier people will be able to continue to travel with similar or better outcomes, less congested roadways, and conversely, lower income drivers could be forced to make hard decisions about where the money to travel will come from, or be spending more time traveling on more affordable or less reliable routes. So of course, as folks have been saying, if there is going to be roadway pricing, it's essential to have a strategy that includes mitigation for the burden on low-income communities. We've seen in some of these case studies examples like including discounts for low-income residents and using revenue generated through the strategy to reinvest in public transportation or other alternatives, particularly in low-income communities. And then lastly, one of the lessons we learned is that continuous evaluation is really essential for improvement. Beyond planning, analyzing, and implementing, it's also very important to continue to collect qualitative and quantitative data after implementation. And that allows us to evaluate a strategy relative to the goals that were identified and to identify the ways for continued improvement of a strategy. So that's just a highlight of what we learned from that approach. It certainly varies by urban area and all the different kind of characters that come with those. And I'm happy to talk more about some of the research that we did in this forum or in other forums in the future. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tegan. And now that we've introduced our full panel, I wanted to thank Councillor Tanya Fernandez-Anderson for bringing this important matter before the council. I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion with my colleagues on how congestion pricing and other potential tools that ameliorate the externalities of traffic and road use can be used to enhance quality of life for every Bostonian and position Boston better for future sustainable growth. I think we've all seen the news that Boston is the 4th worst in the nation when it comes to traffic and the 8th worst in the world. So I think this conversation couldn't be happening at a more important moment. And I want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councillors Ben Weber, Councillor Julie Mejia, and Councillor Liz Braden. Given that we bypassed opening statements or are combining opening statements and first round of questions, I want to give it back to the lead sponsor, Councillor Tanya Fernandez-Anderson, for her questions. And each member of the council will get 5 minutes for questions. And I'm passing it now to Councillor Fernandez-Anderson. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, did you mention, you said 4 questions, not time?
Sorry, I said 5 minutes.
5 minutes, sorry. Okay, thank you. Such amazing feedback from everyone, from the academics, administration, transit advocate, amazing presentations. And I guess I just have some questions, maybe speak more to what has already been said. But my first question to everyone, one of the biggest considerations of this proposal is that I'm looking for is for us to balancing the need to reduce congestion while not adding further burden to low-income commuters, obviously, that need their cars for their job. And I think I heard just about everyone talk about this. How have other cities approached this issue? And I guess, Tegan, you mentioned a little bit about it, but if you can expand on what should Boston consider when thinking about this?
Sure, thank you for the question. So we found that there were a variety of strategies, throughout these different implementations. And one of the things that we heard is really understanding, doing the research and analysis and outreach to understand the potential impacts on equity populations, lower income and minority populations, very, very early at the very start of the planning stage is absolutely essential, because it's much harder to work to mitigate the impact on populations when you're concerned about equity after you've designed a program. So designing those considerations from the start is really essential. In a large part, what that looks like is primarily discounts on different pricing strategies. So for example, in New York, the MTA had invited applications for discount and exemption plans for households earning less than $50,000 a year. Also for those individuals who experience disabilities, and then also, of course, considering other vehicles to exclude from the tolling process. In addition, in some of the examples, like in the Bay Area, the tolling authority is piloting a 50% discount for low-income drivers using tolled express lanes. But another way that folks really talked about showing that reinvestment in equity communities is to make sure that revenue that is collected, while that not being a primary goal of a program, that when that is being reinvested in the transportation system, that those reinvestments are really prioritized in those populations and in the areas where those populations tend to reside. And I believe that was also a pretty significant amount, part of the plan for New York as well, since the investment was largely back into the public transit system in that plan.
Thank you. I guess to anyone, I know I said this before, but anyone who wants to take this question, in thinking about congestion pricing as a long-term goal for the city, what should Boston be doing differently now to set up? And I guess that was part of the response here, but just to set us up for success with this kind of proposal in the future, what kinds of data should we be collecting? What sorts of community processes should be held, or any other information you can offer?
Thank you, Councilor. I would say, I think, you mentioned one of the main things right off the bat, which is collecting a lot of data. I think this would help to, both dispel, myths or worse fears, but also to confirm, which communities might be impacted, and this will help us shape the mitigation. I think it'll also allow us to see, what are the main thoroughfares that in the city that are the most crowded. Where should, if we were to do a cordon pricing type of scheme, which is where you can sort of draw a boundary around it, everyone who crosses that boundary would be charged. If that's the model we want to do, where is that dividing line? I think it would also be looking at, Boston's political geography is complicated with, a major job center and source of I don't want to say source of congestion, but a major trip generator is the Longwood, Medical Center, but which also has spillover facilities in Brookline. I think you would also want to look at, traffic and congestion coming into Kendall Square. So maybe it may be that the congestion pricing is a joint effort among a number of municipalities. So I think that it's a critical one. And then I know concern around cut through traffic or around sort of folks trying to avoid cameras or avoid whatever the mechanism for sort of stopping congestion. And so I think identifying, what are those communities that are at the edge that people might try to cut through, and what are the things that can be done to mitigate that. These are often things that communities have already been asking for, like speed humps or things to slow down traffic. So I think just collecting as much information as possible, exploring potential collaborations, and then identifying what are some of the early mitigations that you might want to implement even before congestion pricing comes into play. Again, we're talking about something that is going to take, I think, the speediest version of this would be something like 5 to 7 years, but more likely 7 to 10 years. So that's more than enough time to start to implement some of these mitigations, and then to identify, again, knowing that raising money isn't the main benefit, but knowing that will happen, start to identify what are some of the large projects that Boston might want to undertake once the congestion money starts rolling in.
Thank you so much, Jared. I think that's my time as the lead or the filer of this proposal or hearing order. I have lots and lots of questions, so I guess I'll come back. Madam Chair, 5 minutes does seem a bit short.
Thank you. I think that we will prioritize just getting through one round with everyone, and then we'll take it to a second round. So thank you so much, Counselor. So now we're going to go to Counselor Erin Murphy. Okay, I think we will. Oh, okay. You ready, Counselor Murphy?
Oh yeah, sorry, I wasn't
you.
sure if I was next. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you, Councilor Durkin, for holding this. I have a few questions. Some of them have been addressed in the opening statements, but just want to get some on the record and hope we can talk more through this. The overall question, and I know some of these are rhetorical questions, but like what benefits would this bring to the city, right? So as an at-large city councilor, making sure, do we have a clear list of the benefits, and do they outweigh whatever, negative impact this could have? And obviously lots of eyes on New York. We've learned a lot from that, or, where do we go from there, and what have we learned from that? And, does the cancellation of the program there mean it would have been counterproductive, or was the program just not efficient? Could it be better? The experts on, this panel definitely can probably answer what their opinion is to that. And I'd just like to know what people's take are on that. And one other in this first round, I thank you for talking about the, secondhand air quality. It may be traffic, it may be idling. There's other ways, you may have less cars on the road, but if it's the congestion could free up others. So we don't really need to answer that, but you did touch on that. I guess those two would be good to start in the first round. Thank you. If anyone wants to talk about those issues.
Yeah, thanks, Counselor. I'm happy to jump in. I think it's a fantastic first question, and it speaks in somewhat to the prior question too. One of the single most important factors that any city will need on this, and this is not a uniquely American answer, frankly, is political courage. There is a consistent set of evidence here. The academic types, including Mike and myself, we might call it political economy. That's just a wonky way of saying that elected officials bear an enormous burden here for the public on this one. It is really hard to communicate the benefits to people on this policy. It has been clearly proven. What's also been clearly proven in this case in a global context is that the policy delivers tangible results. So the courage is both sticking together as a group, and this is the first time meeting many of you besides some of my fellow panelists, so I'm not here to speak to that, but that's going to be really important, and that includes, of course, the administration's team as well, probably the governor, frankly, even without the New York context there, right? So that's going to be important. And partially because you're going to need to get through the communication with folks who have not yet touched the benefits of the policy. There's an extremely, and I'll close on this, there's an extremely well communicated lesson from Stockholm that's been coming up in many of the American journalists have done a great job on this, actually. They've communicated this story, but it's consistent in other places, both in particularly Singapore is the first major example, but also in London. And these were actually all decades apart policies. That's showing once the public saw the benefit, support went up dramatically. And again, that's a somewhat, this is a, I thought Mike spoke extremely well to this like litany of benefits here, but you will not see them until you have the courage to actually follow through on the policy. Final quick point, this is why you saw so many folks across different professional titles, both inside academia, advocacy, even inside governance, so frankly upset with the governor of New York, because the entire political coalition was together, but this one person, and I'm not saying they shouldn't have it, but right, had a kind of a veto card, if you will, and they played it. And it was so close. So that $700 million they invested was not a waste, to speak to your question. It was actually shows you the power of what happens when the elected coalition does not stay together on this policy.
Thank you. I do agree that these big issues, it's the political capital, right, and the political will. I often use those terms when I talk about like BPS and our school system. Like, if there's not enough political will, lots of other people in leadership roles, not elected, but may not continue to advocate. So thank you. No, that was helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Councillor Fernandez-Anderson as well. I have been on the record in opposition to congestion pricing. Boston is already an expensive city. Many of our low-income and middle-class families, seniors, are barely making it here in Boston. Rising cost of living, rent, food prices. In my opinion, it would be unfair to make commuting even more expensive for those already struggling to make financial ends meet. I believe congestion pricing would be inequitable, as many people have mentioned here, and have a disproportionate impact on communities of color as well. Without late night train service, limited bus schedule, unreliable service, low-income workers have no choice but to drive into Boston. We would be burdening them with a struggling and with another expense. Many of our commuters are our hotel workers that I proudly represent. The janitors, nurses, doctors, healthcare staff, teachers, laborers, contractors, administrators, small business owners who live in areas with limited public transit options and drive in from places across Greater Boston, many on the North Shore as well. We should not make it harder for them to provide essential services for us. When our city is already facing staffing shortage in our public safety, traffic enforcement, emergency response teams due to the residency requirement in unaffordable housing market, it is not hard to imagine the labor and skilled shortages we may further lose when we burden commuters who drive into our city on a daily basis to provide critical services. Greater Boston MBTA system as it stands, I think we all agree, is ill-equipped to permanently attract commuters out of their cars and onto trains and buses. Commuters continue to avoid the MBTA because of long delays, unreliable schedules, public safety challenges as well. If congestion tolling forces people off the roads, our already fragile public transit system is unlikely to perform effectively. In listening to the panelists here talk about New York City, we all know that they recently put congestion pricing on hold due to deepened concern over skyrocketing cost, a fragile post-pandemic economy with the hybrid remote workforce in consideration. Instead of a fee or a tax on drivers, it is critical that we invest in more reliable public transportation. Increasing bus routes, frequencies would also be another way to encourage people to take public transit instead of bringing their cars. So I guess my question I want to ask really anyone on the panel is, does anybody have any good information on exactly why New York City, basically through the governor's action, why did New York City not move forward with this proposal? What were the concerns from the governor, and what impact, if any, and how does that apply to Boston? Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'd be willing to speak to that. I think the New York City actually shows us the peril of stopping congestion pricing, because now the governor is actually in a incredibly politically tough situation. I think most would argue a tougher political situation than she was on the eve of implementing congestion pricing, as now she's blown a $15 billion budget in the MTA's capital plan, and there seems to be no one who is willing to bail her out. And so I think, in talking about the ways that we, get folks off the road and encourage them with better bus service, increasing the reliability of the MBTA, a huge part of that is the need for revenue. And unfortunately, in Massachusetts, we have had a difficult time raising revenue, and because the T is a statewide agency that only runs service in a specific part of the state, it has been difficult to get statewide legislators to care about it, or to enact further sort of policies that people see as going beyond just Massachusetts, just beyond the greater Boston area to raise money. So, I think that, of course there was pushback. There were op-eds, and there were articles, decrying it and saying it was going to be terrible, but all of them were conjecture and opinion pieces. There was very little hard economic evidence that it would have been bad. And so I think this was the governor relying on bad political advice, and I think it has harmed her. But I think in Massachusetts, when we talk about the cost and the high cost of living here, a significant part of that is actually congestion. The latest InterRex report that showed that Boston is the 8th most congested area globally showed that Boston drivers lose about collectively the cost of that congestion was $3.2 billion, and that each driver lost about $2,200 when you factor in the lost time and fuel consumption. So I think when we talk about who is disproportionately impacted by congestion, I think it's important that we talk about sort of who is impacted now. And again, those slow bus speeds that we mentioned, those are low-income folks who are disproportionately impacted now with the current system that we have. And so I think it's important when we think about congestion pricing, we can build in some of the things that we mentioned. We can even before congestion pricing happens, we can implement a late night bus system that would allow folks to not have to have driving be their only option. And again, as I can't remember if it was Adi or Mike mentioned, you can just not have tolling or have significant discounts in the overnight hours if we're concerned about a limited availability during those hours. So thank you.
Thank you, Jared, and thank you, Councillor Flynn. Next, we're going to move to...
I was just going to say thank you, Jared. I just wanted to acknowledge that he answered my question, and thank Jared.
Thanks, Councillor Flynn. Next, we're going to move to Councillor Fitzgerald, but I want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Council President Ruth Louisian.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the time, and thank you to Tegan, Jared, Vineet, Addie, and Mike for being here today. Certainly learned a lot in your opening statements, and there's definitely some things to think about. However, it's still a very hard sell for me to sort of wrap my head around, and so I do have some questions. Obviously, there's a concern of, we've mentioned it many times, I don't want to belabor points, other points that have been made too much, but our downtown is taking a beating lately, and I think we've looked at that with the tax reallocations, the valuation of buildings, the small businesses that have closed downtown and things like that. And so I do worry about this diverting people when we need people to come into the city, that this actually helps them decide, I'm not going to come in because I don't want to pay a tax. And we do live in one of the most expensive cities or surrounding regions in the country. And so, people are going to sort of look, to say, if that's a deciding factor of coming in and then saying to themselves, I don't want to pay that toll, just to go in when I otherwise would have come in and spent my money on local businesses. But around that, there's a couple things. The infrastructure and technology that we need. Do we know a cost that it would take to implement the infrastructure and technology to put this, and where does it begin or end in this whole spectrum of the highway or the streets surrounding Boston? And that's for anybody. I'm sorry.
I think but
Go, Tegan, when you go, and then Mike.
all right, I could just again kind of share things that we've heard from others, and this part of the challenge here is that the cost and the level of resources needed will vary significantly based on how any kind of strategy takes shape. So until you've gotten to the point of more clearly defining the goals, which then helps inform the solution or the strategy, it's very difficult to quantify. You see very small scale implementation, like in DC, where they did their parking program. They utilized existing technology through apps and have a very small staff monitoring the program. Something at the scale of New York City involved a lot more investment and was a very different kind of strategy.
Understood.
So I think it really depends on the goals that are established and then what that strategy looks like.
And apologize for being short. We have limited time. I have several questions. Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, a couple things. One is that I think Tegan's absolutely right, and that depending on how you do it, it's really going to impact the startup costs. And so if you look at something like London, which was extraordinarily complicated because it's tons of intersections and they basically put cameras at every single one of them, that is probably the single most expensive way you can do toll. Conversely, if you were to do freeways, and again, I know Boston can't, but like one of the advantages here is it's limited access, there's limited ways, toll gantries on each one, substantially greater savings. If you use sensors rather than cameras, you save a lot of money. One thing I will say is that all of them, except for some very extraordinary situations that involve building entire roads, they all run in the black. So you do get your money back. But
Understood. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Sorry. So would all residents of the city of Boston be exempt?
I would not recommend that.
You would not recommend that. In the city of Boston, who would you recommend be taxed over those who would be exempt?
I candidly, if you want this to work, I would not exempt anyone. I would identify people who you might consider vulnerable on some dimension, maybe it's income, what have you, and I would figure out a way to get them a rebate. It might just be from the revenue, here's X dollars a month. It might be some sort of like tax credit type thing. Maybe you could work with the county and pair it with existing social service programs to make it simpler. The reason I say don't do an exemption is that situations where they've done exemptions, they get abused. It only takes about 10 or 20% of people with exemptions to run wild with them, and then you basically have no pricing.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, and Counselor, I just want to add to, again, this gets at what Tegan and Mike were saying earlier. It depends on how you structure it. So there are some residents who live in Dorchester and work in Roxbury. If your main goal was keeping congestion out of the heart of the city, and thereby also all of the excess drivers who are going through neighborhoods like Roxbury, Dorchester, if that was your goal and your cordon or your area was downtown, people going from Dorchester to Roxbury would not be charged. So it all depends on what your goal is and how you structure the program.
No, I certainly see this as us trying to figure out what way would we go forward with before we can figure out these other questions. But I'm trying to think of intra-Boston business as well, not just residents, because it sounds like from Mike, what you said, I don't think you want any of us reelected if we do no exemptions. But I appreciate the no exemption across the city. I don't know how well we do there. But even business-wise, with intra-Boston, the Seaport or Newmarket Square in my district, shipping fish to Alston Brighton, they have to hop on the highway, and then they have to come back. Are they now charged twice? Do you know what I mean? Like to go out and then to come back? And I don't need an exact answer, but those are the type of things that I'm thinking about, intra-city businesses that would be affected. That's small business and large business.
Very quickly, I can't speak to, obviously, the politics. I mean, that's your area. If you'd be run out of office, so be it. But one thing to always ask about businesses, even small ones, is how much they value their time, right, as opposed to their money. That's true for residents, too. But, if you look at places that have considered congestion pricing, your FedExes and UPSs are usually lined right up to say, yes, absolutely, we need this. We burn so much time in traffic. The killer for a lot of businesses is to have a truck sitting going nowhere.
Yeah.
If you can pay a few extra bucks and get more stops and more transactions, it's worth it to them.
Sorry, just want to acknowledge Councilor Fitzgerald's way over. I had a poorly timed cough, so I ended up going off video and didn't interrupt you at the right time. But Councilor Gabriela Coletta Zapata.
Thank you so much, Chair. I will try to be brief. Thank you so much for keeping us on track, and to everybody for their thoughtful presentation. This is a fascinating conversation, and I'm all ears. I'm learning a lot, and will continue to listen and become more educated on the topic. I think that we can all agree that our roads are getting worse. There's too much traffic, and it's always someone else's fault. It's either somebody in the car's fault, a biker, a pedestrian. I myself, I've said on numerous occasions that I walk everywhere, and so I try to take as much space up as I can, seeing that I do feel like folks with cars do take up a good share, a fair share of the road. And what has been told to me, and this isn't my quote, but what has been told to me from traffic professionals is that you can't build your way out of a traffic problem, especially if it's a regional problem. If you maximize space to be built for cars to traverse our roads, it incentivizes drivers to utilize cars. And that, data shows that cars will always take up that space, and therefore traffic gets worse. And so it's this continuous cycle. And so obviously we have to invest in affordable housing that's close to transit, that will incentivize people to take transit. We need to have a good system that runs well. But I tried to look at places, and it's already been mentioned, like London and New York City, but London did do this already in 2003 and quickly saw an improvements on its streets. And within 1 year, the number of vehicles in the zone dropped 18%, and traffic was reduced by, I think, 30%. And what is really compelling to me is that they were able to raise, I think the equivalent in dollars is 124 million per year. But that is all to say that everything falls into place, and there's no faulty component of the system. And I am still concerned about whether or not this will impact low-income users. I think it's pretty clear that high-income users will likely remain on the highway and will pay the congestion fee. But Jared's point is well taken, that working people who make minimum wage don't live close to transit hubs. They're in last mile zones. They don't have cars, and so they will be on the bus sitting in that congestion more so than anybody else. So this is all, I don't really have a comment or a question. This is all just a comment to say that I'm still looking at this. And I do appreciate the lead sponsor, Councilor Fernandez Anderson, for bringing this forward. And I'm here to listen, but wanted to make clear where I'm at in this moment in time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Coletta Zapata. Next, I think we'll go to Councilor Mejia.
Thank you. Thank you to all of my colleagues for your thoughtful asked most of the ones that I had lined up. And thank you to Councilor Anderson for her leadership in this to bring us together to have a conversation. I think that for me, I'm going to go back and just drill in a little bit closer into some of the impact for small businesses and low-income communities. And I'm just curious for those folks who have been doing this work across the country, if you have any financials or any data in terms of impact that this has had on small businesses and or low-income residents. Any data that you can offer or share. And if you're unclear about what I'm trying to get at, I guess for me, in the case of small businesses, I would like to know, to Councilor Fitzgerald's question in regards to like deliveries, have you seen a decline? And in regards to low-income communities, what options have those folks who don't have the luxury? Because to me, what I've realized in this journey of politics is that there's always someone that's going to win and there are other folks who are going to lose. And I'm always going to root for the people who have the least and who are going to be impacted the most. So I'd like to hear from those folks across the country about how you have supported those who have most, who are the highest need in terms of the vulnerability, in terms of the least financial wealth. How have you helped those folks? Let's just start with that. How has this impacted those folks? If you need a translator, let me know. I'll go to Google and I'll say this to you in another way. I want to know, and I want to be clear, that this is not going to impact low-income communities. And if it does, I'd like to know what that impact looks like. Let's start off with that. Yes, ma'am.
Unless, is there anybody? Okay, I can, because I'll try to be brief and then other folks can jump in. Yeah, it's hard to say in the U.S. because again, no U.S. city has been able to successfully implement this. But again, looking at the New York example, they found that again between 3 and 5% of folks from outer boroughs, low-income folks, were going to be impacted by this. So yes, there would be some impact, but that data showed that it was going to be pretty small. We don't have that data for Boston, but again, the last data that I saw showed about less than 10% of the folks who are on the roadways in the peak of peak driving into downtown Boston or Back Bay. Less than 10% of those folks were low income. But in New York, some of the things that they plan to do were expanding the 50% discount program. And investing some resources into making sure that most people can get that. They provided discounts for people making less than $50,000 a year. They also exempted emergency vehicles, commuter buses, and drivers with disabilities. And that's a huge part of the $15 billion for that capital plan. It was disproportionately geared towards elevator access and helping people with disabilities, as well as in extending the subway further into Harlem. And then there was found to potentially be a negative impact from some folks in the Bronx because of some folks trying to avoid traffic or avoid congestion fee and something like that. And so they had set aside a fund. I'm not sure exactly how much. I can try to look that up. But they did set aside a fund that the Bronx Community Board and that Bronx leaders would be able to use to address climate inequities in the Bronx.
Thank you, Jared. Only just because we've only been given 5 minutes to ask all of these very important questions. I want to make sure that if anyone has anything burning to add, then I'd like to hear it. But if you don't, I'd like to move on to my next question.
May I?
Okay.
May I briefly add?
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, Counselor.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that, like Jared said, it's hard to find an example that would directly correlate. One thing that we do have in the Boston region are the data and the tools that we would need to look at some specific potential implementations of these strategies and work to estimate or predict some of that impact. So I think you have to really do the analysis based on census data and other tools that we have to analyze what we have in Boston. You also asked about businesses. And by the way, that's some work that the NPO has been interested in, is looking into doing, is understanding better potential impacts on equity populations of different strategies. So that's an important question. Yeah. I'm glad you're asking it. In the business side of things, I can highlight a couple of numbers, just that we had from doing the research. In DC, which was more of a cordon base for parking pricing that was variable by day, they found that businesses felt that it reduced both the amount of fines that delivery vehicles had because they could not find parking because of the overall congestion related to parking. They also found it decreased congestion in the areas with priced parking. They also found that the double parking sessions that were there decreased significantly in terms of the number of minutes per vehicle in that area. So that provided a lot of benefits for businesses. And in New York, there was an expectation that the volume of deliveries would remain the same and that the savings in time would sort of offset the cost. I just wanted to highlight some of those research elements that happened with those.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Councilor Mejia, Councilor Mejia, we are over time, but we're going to do a second round. And there are less councilors left, so it should move a lot quicker. So I will next go to Councilor Liz Braden. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Very interesting conversation, very important one. I think I'd really like to dive into the lessons learned from London. I know London's a huge metropolis compared to Boston, but they've been doing it since 2003. Were there particular implementation or lessons to be learned from the London experience? And then also, not to forget the benefits. In Alston Brighton, we have a huge amount of traffic comes in on the Mass Pike. I don't know what the volumes are per day, but most of it is single occupancy cars. And when the Pike gets backed up, I know this is the experience of Councillor Flynn over in South Boston. If the South East Expressway is backed up, then people get off the expressway and they cut through the streets in South Boston, and incidents have resulted in deaths on the streets and in our neighbourhood as well. So there's many human benefits from really being serious about exploring this in a bigger macro scale as well. So lessons learned from London, and then just the timeline in terms of implementation. I think the biggest challenge we have is that our public transit system isn't up to speed to handle increased volumes. We would love to get back to the volumes of pre-COVID volumes on the T, but we have some serious infrastructure disinvestment over many decades to make up for. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. So London, questions about London and how they did it, and what was that sort of timeline that we're looking at to I know we don't have an American and a US example, but any other. I'm wondering if Stockholm is a more appropriate size scale city to Boston. I'm not sure what the size of Stockholm is, but.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Stockholm is a little closer than London, but Stockholm's big too. What I would say is that none of the major international examples is going to translate that well to an American context for a couple of reasons. One is sort of governance reasons. Singapore, of course, is not really a democracy. London has a rather unique transportation governance structure where the mayor and through Transport for London just controls every aspect of surface transportation in London. It's very vertically integrated, and that's very helpful. That mayor ran explicitly on a platform of doing congestion pricing, and people have commented that it was sort of this strange combination of a socialist mayor running with basically a libertarian platform that helped sort of push it through. The other thing about all these cities is that a relatively small proportion of people drove into these areas to begin with, and all of them have fairly strong national level safety nets, which they did not have to do any kind of local level redistribution to address equity problems. None of that would hold in the United States, and so you can learn things from London. I think the main lesson to take from London is not related to any of that or how they did it. It's what they actually wanted to do. That the London congestion charge was not ultimately designed to reduce congestion in that area. What they did is some people have alluded to this already, they demonstrated to the public that they could control congestion and reduce the amount of cars. And then, because they did not necessarily want high speeds in the middle of London, they took that money and basically reshaped a lot of London streets to make them much harder to drive through, better for cycling and walking and so forth. And so traffic speeds actually came back down, right? They just made a much more livable place. That's one goal that you can execute congestion pricing. It goes, I think, to what a number of our speakers have said, which is that you really have to decide what you want to do. If you were to price the freeways, you could get very different outcomes than if you did a London-style cordon charge.
Thank you. And I'm just curious in terms of data about, taking the local road congestion, going into getting traffic off the highways and into the neighborhoods, which is dangerous. And do we have any data on that? And I know Waze, I don't know if Waze has any help in that, or do we have access to data from Waze about how people are changing their behavior when the highways are congested?
Yeah, there's absolutely no question that one of the main reasons people cut through local streets is because the highways are congested. And you can see that also in terms of the speed flow patterns of just sort of everyday driving in most metropolitan areas. One implication of that is that if you were to price the freeways, this is somewhat counterintuitive, you would pull traffic off surface streets onto the freeways. Right, you would do that the reverse of what's happening now, where people sort of see that the freeway is so crowded that they decide to cut through downtown or things like that.
Wow, that is counterintuitive. Is there any explanation for why that is?
Yes, it's because this might sound, it's because congestion is very nonlinear, right? It's a small share of vehicles on a road that actually account for most of the delay. And somewhat paradoxically, if you charge a toll just high enough to convince 5-7% of people who would get on that freeway not to get on it, you prevent the road from tipping into a form of congestion that actually really bottles things up and prevents more vehicles from using it. If you remember the Three Stooges and the doorway gag, when all three of them try to run through the door at the same time and get stuck, that's essentially what happens when volumes on a freeway get too high, right? If they had just entered a little bit more slowly, all of them could have gone through very easily, and instead they all went at once and they created the jam. The same thing happens on the freeways, and as such, traffic congestion on freeways actually reduces the amount of driving that can occur on that freeway and pushes it into the surface streets.
Wow. How am I doing for time, Madam Chair?
You're actually over, but I didn't want to interrupt, and I acknowledge that that 5 minutes is a little short. So I'm going to give everyone 6 minutes on the second round. So I think the last counselor, and then I'll go, is Council President Ruth Lucian.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to thank Councilor Fernandez Anderson for this filing and having this robust conversation. We've talked a lot about the traffic, and really, two of the biggest reasons behind congestion pricing is one, to reduce the traffic that we see, and second is to provide financing or funding to help our public transit or whatever other transportation needs in the cities. And just so that I heard, no, there hasn't been a major city to really institute congestion pricing here in the United States, but there are some smaller cities that have been experimenting and been doing some work with congestion pricing. So I just wanted to clarify that. And in the cities around the world that have congestion pricing, do we also see like a more robust transit system? And I think that, I see Jared, I see you shaking your head. And one of my colleagues had commented about the need for more transit-oriented housing. I literally go to sleep at night to the commuter rail, which runs through my backyard. And I think that we need to have more. I want to hear the train more. I want it to be more frequent. And we actually just successfully got the Fairmount line to increase the number, how frequently it's going. We need to see more of that. But just a plug to support that more transit-oriented housing would be an important addition. But to my other questions of the congestion pricing, and are there models, and apologies if you answer that, are there models that we're looking at here in the United States, even if they're smaller scale? I know that New York has been put on hold. Because there are also other benefits to congestion pricing in terms of, and I'm not sure if you've spoken to this already, if asthma is a disease of poverty that results from the hyperconcentration of pollution and emissions of gas, right? And I think another colleague mentioned that those who are poor and low income, I went to school with my dad, poor, low income family, taking the bus and train with me as I went to school. He took it to work. And so thinking about who are we really affecting, I think is really important. But if someone could just give me a snapshot of where we're looking to for examples, that would be helpful.
I should probably clarify, if that's all right, because I've been talking about a number of other cities within the US in some of these examples. New York City was the closest to the kind of envisioned London-like Gordon-style congestion pricing implementation that was approaching. The other examples of cities and towns, or cities and areas, that I've been bringing up are a variety of roadway pricing strategies and congestion pricing strategies that are not simply the Gordon-style version of it. That is one solution that I think should be considered for very specific reasons and goals.
What style did you just say, Tegan? Sorry.
the cordon style. So having like a cordon around an area downtown that people drive into and drive out of, like New York's planning. So I mentioned a number of other examples of ways to do congestion pricing that are very different than that cordon style strategy. They can involve tolling specific lanes in variable ways, parking in variable ways. All of that needs congestion pricing in some format or another if it is designed to affect pricing to influence congestion and have some of the other kind of benefits that you're talking about in terms of GHG and other improvements. So I may be confusing, like it may be sounding like I'm bringing up a number of other kind of cordon style congestion pricing examples. We do not have an example of that implemented in the US to the scale of something like London.
Which has the tube, which is a much more robust, more reliable public transportation system, which I think is also like an important part for us to be thinking about. As much as I want to see a better MBTA, as much as we have the Fair Share Act, like we don't have a transit system that we are proud of yet.
Yeah. And I would add to that, Councillor, I know you were asking, what are some of the benefits? London rolled out, I'm trying to find the exact number of miles, but they rolled out miles of bus lanes. Right afterwards, they were able to totally replace their bus fleet, and then it also went into improvements to the London Underground. I think when the congestion charge was first being talked about in London, their system actually was in pretty rough shape, and so they have been able to use the congestion fees to improve the signaling on their transit, to buy new vehicles, and it did provide a decent source of funding for their new Crossrail project, which is their new sort of the version of the North-South Rail Link type thing that they have just completed over there. And all of the other cities as well were able to pour that money back into increased bike lanes, increased buses, new trams, new vehicles, increases in the amount of service hours. So I think, again, that's a huge part of what can happen in that anywhere from 5 to extreme 15 years is getting the T on the right track and being able to use the money to make some of those improvements.
Awesome. So you're saying it happened simultaneously. Thank you.
It happened simultaneously, and then it also was a critical source of funding for the future. And I think that's something we know that the T is going to have. There's no one magic bullet policy that's going to fix the T's financing problems. It's going to have to be a range of things. And I think congestion pricing is one of the strongest ones. And critically, it's also one of the ones that, yes, we'll take the legislature to okay it, but is less likely to sort of be oh, well, let's take this money, let's pull it to Western Mass, or let's pull it to other places.
Thank you. So I'm gonna ask my questions now. So I'll set a timer. So looking, and maybe this is a great question for you, Tegan. Looking at other designs implemented, what is the ideal interaction between municipal, regional, and state governing bodies in the implementation and enforcement of pricing mechanisms? How would MassDOT and the city partner, and would that be an ideal partnership on this particular issue?
That's a really great question. Thank you, Councillor. And what we found, as always, is it looks a little bit different everywhere that they've implemented strategies. But in all cases, there really aren't examples of this where a city can simply go out and implement a strategy like this. You usually need legislative change. You usually need the cooperation of not just the roadway owners, but also the transit agency, the Mass DOT. It requires very significant interagency collaboration to figure out who is not only going to be involved in planning, but also then who's going to be sort of the main owner of the implementation of it. And in almost no cases did we see this purely implemented by a city. So often it's either a regional agency or an agency that operates certain roadways. In the New York case, the agency that was then taking the lead on overseeing the board that was going to oversee was actually the transit agency, was the MTA. So I'm not sure there's an ideal. There is a need to collaborate early and deeply on what a solution like that could look like.
And Vineet, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think Jared talked about this, that while it will take a lot of coordination between state and city entities, public agencies, equally important, we need a statewide, or if not that, at least a regional coalition of political interests, of elected officials coming together. There's no way that this would move forward unless there is political consensus that this is the direction that we should go in.
Thank you, Director Gupta. I have two questions, and I know that I put everyone on this quick timeline, so I've got to get them off really quickly. So this is to you, Mr. Tomer. What can Boston learn from New York's experience around the genesis, formation, and pause on congestion pricing? Are there policy designs, preferences that NYC chose that Boston could learn from or avoid? And then my other question, just so that is we've got, and this is kind of for everyone, and maybe Professor Manville, this is something that you could take, but obviously this is if there's a carrot and a stick, this is the stick, but what is the carrot? And how can we encourage folks to, I think we're doing everything we can as a city to encourage people when they can to take public transit. But if this is the stick, how can we provide incentives prior to needing to utilize this tool? Though I think it's a really important option. I think just given the multi-jurisdictional nature of this, like it was just described, want to figure out what those incentives are. So first I'll go to you, Edie.
Yeah, thanks, Counselor. I'll try to be really fast so my peers can answer the second question, which I'll try to weigh in really quick too. I already spoke about political courage and the importance of it to actually kind of plus one, if you will, something that Mike mentioned earlier. What really undid it was this consistent conversation and actual amount of tactics around exceptions in the policy. And I think political science analysis in the long run is going to note that ended up boxing in the governor and in ways that actually have been problematic for her own kind of standing, as actually Jared, I think, noted in one comment too. So it speaks to, again, to kind of amplify something Mike said, you don't need congestion pricing through to have exceptions built in. You can actually just design the policy to work in a more equitable manner for everyone and use other policy instruments at your disposal, including just outright income-based, right, credits and things, right, through the overall tax code, right, to actually benefit people in a very targeted manner. And of course, the carrot here to your second question is improved service and smoother moving roads. I'm laughing because, is there another place, this is all real politique here, right? Is there another place where you increase a charge for someone and then months later, the public says, I like that charge, right? Because you're actually delivering a benefit to them. It's a tangible one. And then even better, you don't just need to be a driver to see the benefits, as I think all four of us today have outlined how that's delivered. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what Amy just said. And I would just add in response to your carrot and stick issue that there's already, and you kind of alluded to this, there's already a lot of carrots out there. We heavily subsidize alternatives to drive. Could we do more? Sure. Obviously, the T needs a bunch of work. But in general, if you get on the commuter rail in Reading and ride it into Boston, the price you pay is far below what it actually costs the T to transfer you in. We've rolled out a lot of carrots. The big distortion that exists in our transportation market is not the absence of incentives to do something other than drive. It's the artificially low price of driving when you think about the actual costs that impose on other travelers, on the environment, and so forth. And that's, parking's a big part of that, but one of the biggest parts is just our roads are extremely valuable real estate, and we give them away for free. And when you do that with anything, you're going to get a shortage, and that's what congestion is, right? And so it's just you can think about it in terms of carrots and sticks, but you can also just think about it in terms of prices do play a very important role in allocating goods. We do not run out of gasoline or cars in Boston because we charge for those. You don't charge for road space, you run out of it, and everybody dislikes it, and that's the price gets you out of that trap.
Thank you, Professor. And now we're going to go back to, finally, our original sponsor of this, Counselor Tanya Fernandez-Anderson. So I'm going to give everyone on the second round 6 minutes. I'm going to do it in the order of arrival, but if you don't have a second set of questions, that's totally fine. Counselor Fernandez-Anderson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is to Vineet, the administration, or my first question is, Vineet, do you have any information whether or not the city currently measures congestion? And is there a comprehensive citywide plan to reduce congestion currently or in the works?
So we, thank you for that question. We, as part of our updating of our citywide plan called Go Boston 2030, we are actually currently in the process of collecting data on congestion, which would match the annual release of information by INRIX. So we're going to use the same data and kind of show apples to apples how when you hear from INRIX that Boston is the 8th most congested city, it's actually not the city of Boston. It's the Boston region that they're talking about there. It's all the connections, the highway connections to the North Shore, to the South Shore, the Turnpike, all of that there. And so we're going to create a congestion index that's just for Boston. So that's definitely in the works here.
That's fantastic. Great to hear.
And you'll hear about it literally in a month or so.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. And have you guys considered how the city will actually partner with neighboring cities or in addition to the state when it comes to monitoring and reducing congestion?
Yes, absolutely. So like I mentioned at the very outset, that congestion is a regional problem. It's just not a Boston problem. So the solution has to be regional in nature. And we think that the MBTA has to play a major role in that. And that our focus has been to try and help the team, and particularly for bus service through bus lanes, improve bus service in the city so that there is an opportunity for people who would have otherwise got into a car and gone to where they have to go to take bus service instead. We've also worked with the T to improve subway service, improving access to stations, working with them to make sure that when they shut down a line, that the diversions are managed well so that people don't give up taking the subway. So we think that the solution is through working with the MBTA and then working with our immediate communities. You know, what happens at Kendall Square impacts what happens at MGH and what happens in downtown Boston. We are working very closely with the cities of Somerville and Everett to kind of talk about what's going on in that whole Sullivan Square area where all the regional connections are coming together. There's a lot of activity on that front that our planners are currently engaged in.
Yes, it's very exciting to look at Somerville evolving. We go back and forth, and we know that it's taken its toll, and now seeing it into.
And similarly in East Boston, I know Councilor Coletta is
yes, and in East Boston, absolutely. Thank you so much. I had a question about hypothetical implementation, but I think I'll hold that off. It doesn't seem like the city is prepared to take a position yet, which is probably not fair to ask that question. For Adi, I wanted to thank you so much for your statement about political courage, because when we look at research-based policies and we understand that it's just science, it works, we have data, and although I of course agree with my colleagues that there has to be improvements on transportation in making our cities more livable and or walkable streets and transit oriented. Still, there is sufficient research here to show that this is scientific, and we should definitely have the courage to move forward, to take our responsibility as council to represent the better good for our constituents, and I think that means starting with this conversation, two, hopefully following up with the administration, following their research, and looking at how we're working together to continue further this conversation to a solution that, of course, can mitigate some of the concerns that we've heard here today. Jared, I wanted to ask you, specifically around that. You know, Boston's public transit infrastructure looks a lot different than MTA or the CTA. If we know that by implementing congestion pricing, we aim to incentivize alternative means of transportation. I think that Tegan spoke a little bit about this in terms of parking and other means. What can a city like Boston do today to help make that viable reality in the future?
Thank you. I think it's continuing some of the current work on bus lanes and speeding up bus traffic. I think it is continuing the work on the Fairmount line and looking at other commuter rail corridors where we could add in additional stops to increase the access and just generally support the MBTA in electrifying those lines so they can get there faster. I also think that it's critical. The MBTA is starting their 20-year long-range plan this fall, and so I think it's really critical that the city engage in that process and push for big, bold, visionary stuff. Now, that stuff is would not likely be finished before congestion pricing is implemented, but it would perhaps give us some examples of what that congestion pricing could help us implement. And then I think the final thing I'll say is more mixed-use development and housing in and around Boston. Right, if folks are able to walk to the grocery store or bike to the grocery store safely, then that is one less vehicle on the road as well. So I think those are the critical pieces. Thank you.
Thank
so much.
you.
Is that time, Councilor?
Oh yeah, you're right at time, but we can come back to you if you'd like for a third round. Thank you, Councilor Tanya Fernandez-Anderson. Councilor Flynn, do you have any other remarks or questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would push back on one of the panelists talking about political courage or lack of political courage. And the reason I would say that is we also have a responsibility and obligation to our constituents that work in the downtown area. Many of them work the second shift or the third shift and need their automobile or can't rely on the MBTA for service to get into downtown areas. So I wouldn't use that phrase political courage. It's also about supporting our workers that provide an exceptional job, exceptional role in the downtown area. There might be hotel workers, or they might be nurses or doctors or small business people. But to describe it as not having political courage to do it is not helpful to the conversation. I would also highlight that as we talk about these types of issues, we need to still encourage workers to come back to downtown Boston. We need a vibrant and strong downtown Boston, and working from home remotely is really not a solution long-term. A long-term solution is bringing people back consistently to downtown Boston, whether that's 4 days a week or whatever it is. But Boston can't continue being a successful city if people are only going to come to downtown Boston 2 or 3 days a week. Just want to ask if any of the panelists want to comment on my suggestions.
I'll just jump in with something really quick, Councilman, and I really appreciate your commentary both in the first round and now this time too. I just want to clarify my comment, so extra reason I appreciate it. The courage I'm speaking to is not the relationship with your constituents and how you channel their ideas. It's actually among the elected class, and that's not just a Boston comment, that's an anywhere comment, among how the elected officials are able to work with each other to design a system that works for them. So my comment is strictly about there's a pretty kind of consistent pattern here that seems to happen where the evidence becomes clear, but one by one elected officials kind of break with their peers on support they have, and then they shift to no. What happens to that and whether it's unjustified, I'm not commenting on that. But if it's strictly about what gets to the point where a policy can be adopted, it often is not going to be the statistical evidence. It's going to be just from elected officials. And again, that's not just going to be in the city, potentially even up through the state level. So again, just strictly a political science kind of commentary, if you will. It's not about any one individual's lack of courage. If anything, the courage to carry your convictions is always important.
No, thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and let me also just address your points about downtown Boston. I think a number of people have said, thus far that you can do this congestion pricing different ways, and anything can be done badly. And so if someone puts up a wall around downtown Boston and says it's $60 to get in no matter what, that's a bad policy. A canonical congestion pricing program, though, is not going to do that. It really is going to be sensitive to charging more when the road is congested. And what that suggests is that if you have a downtown with high vacancy rates and not many people going, and the toll is going to be low. It also suggests that at night, the toll is going to be extremely low, and we see that happen in places like Singapore and on the 210 out here in Los Angeles, where I think the toll is like 25 cents in the middle of the night. And so when you have these swing shift workers and overnight workers, which is disproportionately where a lot of your low-income workers work, they for all intents and purposes would not pay the tolls, right? So this is just to say that you can design a program to account for some of these concerns. If you design a program that's just to sort of wring money out of people, then yeah, you're going to hurt some people and you're going to hurt some businesses. If you're sensitive to the idea of actually making the transportation system work, you can avoid a lot of those problems.
I also think it's really important to know too that the current issues we're having with downtown vacancy are when most people do not pay for the road. So I think it would suggest that right now congestion is the biggest thing that is keeping people out of downtown. And so again, as Mike mentioned, I think looking at how we can exempt people at certain times, or how we can perhaps lower commuter rail fares before congestion pricing comes into effect to get folks downtown that way. I think that would be a really sound policy.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Councillor Flynn. So next we're going to move to Councillor Fitzgerald. Councillor Fitzgerald, do you have a second round of questions?
Thank you, Chair. No, it seems to me that the real outcome of this, and maybe I could ask through the chair to our panelists, if the real decision here has to be is what type of program would we put together for the city, right? Because there's from just a small congestion pricing to the larger stuff and all the different options we have throughout the country and the world. If there's examples of like a written description of each or what could be done, I think it would help this body sort of better understand, okay, which one actually would make sense if any of these do. Again, I'm hard pressed to support many of them at the moment, but maybe I just don't understand it enough. And so if there are examples that could sort of be described and we had sort of options to choose from and understand better, I think that might help frame the discussion for us more, because it's hard to talk, Tegan, as you mentioned, it's hard to go any further in this conversation without knowing which one we're actually talking about implementing, right? And I think we still need, as a body and as a city, need to understand what those are. Because I do have other questions, but as I look at them, I'm like, well, it all depends, right? And I don't want to just speak in hypotheticals here. I guess one question I have, sort of a philosophical question, Mike, this might be for you. When you mentioned when things are free, they are overused, right? The streets we do not charge for, and therefore congestion happens. But how far do you take that, right? And does it really apply? Because when I apply it to other things, it doesn't make sense, and I want to know why it would apply to streets. And I understand the congestion, but I mean, if our parks were too congested, should we start charging for people to use our parks? Our bike lanes, if we do want more people to bike, that is now a free service we offer, and actually causes some of the congestion in the city by taking up road space. Are we charging the biking community and saying we should have congestion prices for bike lanes? At what point does it start? You know what I mean? I think it's just more of a philosophical question. I'm not here to stir trouble. It's just where does that stop and start, right?
Yeah, Counselor, I think you're causing a lot of trouble. We could have a long conversation about this, but there's two aspects to it. One is that, like, is something free just because there isn't a ton of demand for it, right? And if that's the case, then it's not going to get congested, and obviously it's silly to put a charge on that. If your park is pretty empty and no one's there because they want to go do something else, well, then obviously slapping a charge on it isn't going to make it work more efficiently. That'll be counterproductive. If you do get a situation where the park is mobbed, right? Well, then you can ask yourself, well, what are the relative benefits and costs of putting a charge on, right? Which is to say, and I think for a lot of people, we would say, well, you know what, a crowded park is a little bit harmless. It's actually kind of nicer to have more people around, and it's very difficult to levy the charge because you can enter the park from all different angles, and it just wouldn't make sense to say that we just don't want to have some congestion in our parks. The road, on the other hand, you say, well, when the road's congested, it just absolutely doesn't work. And it doesn't work for the people using it, and it doesn't work for a lot of people around it. And that would, in my opinion, tilt you in favor of saying, like, actually, the more efficient thing to do is probably to use a price for it so that it can work better for more people. Because another example in terms of a park that's much more, I think, analogous would be like the electric system, right? So think about municipally owned network infrastructure. The electricity, heating, fuel, your water systems. We charge regressive fees for all of those, and in part it's to pay for them, right? But in part it's to make sure that people use them kind of judiciously, because we understand that if we don't do that, the system's going to collapse, right? And Boston doesn't have blackouts all the time, but it does have its road system collapse at least twice a day. And the difference is we've chosen to charge for those other forms of network infrastructure, and we don't for roads. So it's not a universal thing. There's times when you can look at a crowded piece of infrastructure and say, hey, yeah, laissez-faire. But there's times when it probably is wise to think about a price.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Mike. It's just, I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
And Councilor Fitzgerald, we're almost at time, but I will request, and if anyone on this panel would like to share some resources with my office, I'm happy to share them to all the councilors that attended today, especially any sort of academic papers around this particular issue. So I think next we'll go to Councilor Mejia. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor and you have 6 minutes.
Okay, 6 minutes. All right, y'all. Back for round two. So I wanted to just thank Mike. I think that the last 3 hours that I've been listening, your last comment really put a lot of things in perspective, at least for me, in terms of the wear and tear of a system, right? Like if we don't use it and if we abuse it and how it can just collapse. Really do appreciate that framing, because I think I'm always, in terms of political will and courage, Adi, I'm gonna tell you, I have the most of it all here. I have absolutely no fear in the things that I support or don't, because I'm independent, right? So the only people who can take me out are the ones that put me in. So whatever decisions I make are always going to be around the people that I am here to speak on behalf of. And that is oftentimes folks who are low income, because they're the ones who have the greatest need, right? And so that's why I want to make sure that I'm utilizing my time to make sure that I'm able to go back to them and say, here's what the experts and the scientists have reported back in terms of some of the things that they are concerned about. So I really do appreciate you all taking the time to answer our questions, because then we can go back to our constituents and clarify some facts and myths. So thank you both, and everyone here for your insight and perspective, because I answer to those who are not here, who don't have the privilege to listen into this hearing because they're at work. So anyways, Mike, going back to your comment, I lived in New York right after 9/11, and I think a year later there was a blackout. And I lived that, and I know how terrifying it was, because I only had like $20 in my pocket, and even the ATMs were like out. And, that was definitely a really good example that you provided. And I'm curious, as you start thinking about the wear and tear in the city of Boston, because a lot of folks that come into Boston or are utilizing, us as a throughway, they don't live here. Right. And I'm just wondering, from a kind of like are there any examples where folks who don't live in Boston are charged at a higher rate, right? Are there some tiers that we can consider? I'm also curious about, like, I'm a single mom. If you're a single mom and you have 3 kids in multiple different spaces and places, and you have to drive to get your kids to school, what financial hardships can look like, and what examples can you share that will help address that situation? But I'll start with that, and then I can come back for some, if I have any more time left, for other questions.
Yeah, I think these are great questions, Counselor. I think that with respect to the first one, conceivably, and I'm sure other panelists can weigh in on this too, conceivably prices can be designed in lots of different ways. I think canonically, like when I talk to a classroom about this, what I usually say is, like, everyone pays the same sticker price to use the road, because from a fairness perspective, everyone, all cars do about the same to create congestion, right? And so it's just kind of like, if you're using the resource, it doesn't really matter where you live. It's just that you're on that piece of road, you're slowing other people down and so forth. And that if we think, for instance, someone is vulnerable because of their low income, the best thing to do is to do what we do, for instance, with electricity and heating fuel right now, which is find a way using the revenue to help mitigate the burden on those folks. So, like, for instance, what we don't do with the electric bills, even though, and heating bills in the Northeast, which we know are very high and can be very burdensome for some people, is say some households are just completely exempt. Right, we have programs instead to offer some sort of lifeline service, and what that does is it maintains the sort of incentives and efficiency that the price imposes, but on the back end, make sure nobody is unduly harmed. From a sort of nerdy professor perspective, that is the best way to do it. I recognize that for political reasons, people may tweak it here and there in other ways as well.
Counselor, you've got about a minute left.
Sorry, I got a minute and 30 seconds because I had a hard time coming off of mute. And I'm curious, just because I keep hearing from a political standpoint, and maybe I'm oblivious to what the political, what are you all talking about that I don't know about? Because I don't see this. Is it political? Because some people, like, help me understand what the political sacrifices are, because for me, this is more, I don't see it as political, or maybe it is, and I don't know, but I think the way that I'm envisioning this is that what we're trying to do here is 2 things. One is reduce congestion, right? Because that's going to help save the planet ultimately, right? And provide us a fund or a way to bring in some more dollars so that we can fix our transit system, right, in our infrastructure, right? So I think those 2 things are like, duh, right? There's nothing political there, at least that I can see. But I guess the political for me comes at the expense of people who are living in poverty and that they potentially can be impacted. That for me is where I see any political capital me using. I need to make sure that I'm using it in a way that's not going to cause harm to the people that I serve. Is there another political strand that I'm not, that no one is named?
I would say that the median voter in the United States, their preferred solution to traffic congestion is some program that forces every driver except them to change their behavior. As a result, tolls don't usually go over very well.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could add something really, really fast, it's the adding a fee is politically challenging, right? And the only thing I'd add to the benefits is, and again, I think why this polls so well, is that what you give people back is truly their most valued resource, which is time. And so there's this massive list of benefits, but politically speaking, there is this extremely, and I really mean that with respect, like this extremely hard burden on those who are in office at the time to say that there will be a new fee on something, to Mike's point, that people expected to be free because they discount the cost of their time in driving in any given instance, right, if they're not using it yet. So there's some challenges there.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Councillor Durkin, for allowing my colleagues and I to go just a little bit over. But I think that in the interest of making sure that we're doing our due diligence, I think the responses that I received in the second round really helped put a lot of things in perspective. So Councillor Anderson, thank you so much for your leadership and your courage for bringing this to the council. And I look forward to continuing to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Mejia. So next we're going to go to Councillor Liz Braden and then Council President Ruth Sulujah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'd like to go back to something Vineet said a little while ago about that, Boston on its own can't pull this together. It has to be a regional approach. I know that a lot of the traffic we see in our neighbourhood they're not Boston residents. They're folks from the western suburbs who come through and use our streets and our roadways to get downtown or to go somewhere else. I really feel like one of the challenges we have is that in this development of incredible growth and lab development, that we've seen developers putting in 2 parking spaces for every 1,000 square feet of lab space, and there are millions of square feet of lab space. So we're actually adding a lot of traffic to the roads and not regulating that space better. And then I think we should also do a whole lot more in terms of regulating and trying to increase higher occupancy vehicle usage, maybe more dedicated bus lanes on the highway or whatever, so that we'd be able to move more people in a smaller space at a better time. So I don't know. There's also so many other different tools to use. I think in the conversation about the realignment of the Mass Pike and taking down of the viaduct on the I-90, the present plan from MassDOT is proposing to put back 8 lanes of highway after we've reduced the highway capacity for 10 years because when the project's been built, it doesn't make any sense. So then also the issue about increasing capacity on the commuter rail, I think I'm right in line with that, and adding infill sites, infill rail stops in the western approaches to Boston, so that people will actually choose to come into town, right into the centre of the downtown area on a rail, and not be bringing a car into town. It doesn't make any sense. So, any thoughts about? I think it has to be a multi-factor approach to this, and it also has to engage at a regional level, and it's not something that Boston can do on its own. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It does have to be a regional approach. It does need to involve different policy mechanisms ahead of it. Again, I talked about more mixed use developments. People can walk places, but you're right. Parking. Boston is still not one of the, I think, 200 plus cities that has abolished parking minimums. So I think there is, you're right. It has to be a broad suite of things. And as you've mentioned and other folks have mentioned, yes, some of the folks who would be subject to this fee would be Boston residents, but a sizable amount of them would not. And so it is, if we're thinking about folks who have been displaced from Mattapan, Dorchester, Roxbury to Brockton, Randolph, other places, we're going to need to make sure we're improving the public transit in those places as well. So I think it does need to be a really a robust conversation that involves the APC, involves other regional planning agencies, and takes into account how are we increasing commuter rail access in a suburb, because that is downstream of getting folks on the commuter rail instead of on the roadways.
Thank you for that, because when you think about Lynn and they lost their commuter rail service for a little while, and even the low-income workers in Lynn don't get on the commuter rail because it's too expensive, so they still choose to drive in or
take a bus
and sit in traffic. Brighton, where I'm sitting right now, is 7 miles from downtown, on a good day, you can get downtown in 20 minutes, but most of the time, at peak times, it can take you an hour and 20 minutes to get downtown. It's 7 miles away. It's ridiculous. And then on the T, like the same challenges. We have a neighborhood that has very low car ownership. Like I think it's probably 40%. So taking those cars off the streets and making it a bit easier for the people who actually live, work and play here in the neighborhood to get to work downtown. And you know, encouraging those folks who are coming from elsewhere outside the city to go on the highway and get there. I think if we find ways to shift that mode shifting so that we can get the optimal conditions for everybody is the way to go. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the program for mass transit, the PMT or the T's long range 15 to 20 year plan, I think it's really making sure that we are, you know, yes, holding that our system is in rough shape now, but not letting that scare us from talking about the big issues. And one of those is, there are too many neighborhoods of Boston that are, as the crow flies, 4, 5, 6, 7 miles from downtown, but it takes an extraordinary amount of time. And so I do think really pushing back on the idea that transit is just this extra side social service and we'll throw out some money when we can, but really starting to value people's time, both poor people's time and the very high paid, you know, residents who work in and around Boston, and really make speed of travel a critical part of our discourse going forward, because I think that is how we get that mode shift. Transit needs to not be just merely adequate or just there. It needs to be excellent. It needs to be competitive with driving, and I think that's how we make congestion pricing, you know, not a burden. But I think we can do that. If there are smaller steps in the short term with bus lanes, things like that. I think in the longer term, it is. In the medium term, it's doing better with our commuter rail system, and even longer term, it is you know, using the dreaded E word, expansion. Right, this is a region that has more economic value than Norway, but yet our plans for the future are really pretty pitiful. But we can change that.
Yeah, we have many lessons to learn from European experience when it comes to mass transit. So yeah. Vineet, did you have anything to talk about in terms of the regional approach to this, like how we have to connect and partner? I know we have a conversation quarterly with our friends in Cambridge and Watertown about just the local infrastructure here.
I think, and you know, we did not do this a lot, you know, 5 years ago, but Boston needs to, and we do it far more now. Boston needs to participate in improving commuter rail services.
Yeah.
Because for every person who gets on the commuter rail and doesn't get onto the interstate system to come to downtown is a savings in congestion, a savings in emissions, etc. And so it helps Boston for us to work with even communities that are kind of, you know, at the end of a commuter rail line to make sure that more and more people take that service. And we worked very hard to improve frequency of service on the Fairmont line. Granted, that's all in Boston, but still. And, you know, the initial improvements that they did 2 years ago was because of some of the suggestions that our transit team here in Boston made to the D. But they're going one step further now and increasing frequency even more. So we have to work on commuter rail. I think that's really, really important. I can talk a lot about parking, but I won't go there right now.
Sorry, we're a little bit over, so just want to give everyone there.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Councilor Braden. Council President Ruthie Louishan.
Thank you. I just wanted to my attempt to frame this. So like, you know, this is use of the roadways, and the roadways are a public good and a public space. There are cost-benefit analysis that every individual driver does to determine whether or not it makes sense for them to engage, right? Like maybe I get to work, it feels like I get to work quicker, you know, got to put up with traffic and got to pay for gas. But then there are sort of the negative externalities that we all face and feel like that that are a result of the policy decisions about, and I think that's why the policy around this has changed from let's build more highways to why don't we work on addressing the issues that undergird why there is so much traffic, like how do we support a stronger MBTA system. So my understanding of why we're having this conversation for something that is a public good is because it's creating these negative externalities that we're trying to grapple with, whether it be traffic, whether it be asthma, or all these other things, or we want to address the issues of climate change, and that those are the ways of how we solve those issues are politically difficult for a number of reasons. I think Addie, you talked to it about it being a fee and no one wanting it to be a fee that they pay, but recognizing that there's a greater issue. So I just wanted to sort of offer that framing that it's it's because it's this public good that we are all using, and then these negative externalities that society as a whole is realizing and paying for, that we have to figure out, which is why there's a problem in the first place. I wonder whether, when we think about congestion pricing, and someone was talking about it, it's something that I try not to talk about as a Boston City Councilor. We've talked a lot about regionalism and about how these are regional issues. And I remember first running for this office, my local government law professor was like, don't talk about regionalism because no one wants to solve problems as a region. But when you look at transit and when you look at housing, these are regional issues that we have to solve for. And it's important when several people mentioned that congestion pricing will also be for those who are coming in from the suburbs. I wonder if there is a way, if anyone has an idea of how suburbs that are not Boston, how they can, in their own ways, be solving some of this regional problem of traffic that we're seeing in a way that's unrelated to congestion pricing. Like, are there other ideas that folks have about how the cities and towns that sort of abut Boston or surround Boston can be helping us solve our traffic issues if we were to lay the conversation around congestion pricing to the side?
Because I have region in the name of my agency, if you don't mind, I feel like I should respond to that.
No, you should. I love talking about regionalism. It's just that we don't do it enough. So,
well, what I will say is that, MPOs as regional agencies exist because there is a recognition that state level top-down planning didn't acknowledge enough during the highway building era the local and community needs, destroying neighborhoods in the city of Boston to build highways through them, for example. Mm-hmm. So the feds established MPOs to be a space for that local, regional, and state collaboration between these agencies. So the MPO is a board of 22 representatives, including state, regional, and a number of cities and towns, and sub-regional representatives. And in that space, we have gotten together with that board. No one agrees exactly on what things should look like, but they have agreed that roadway pricing is a really important topic to discuss and research, and a way to move towards accomplishing the region's goals. So in that space, you might have a suburban community like Framingham is represented on the board, has a slightly different perspective and opinion than City of Boston, which has 2 seats on the board. But the overarching ability to talk about and establish goals, that we know that congestion, for example, has a cost, has all of these externalities and costs that we've been talking about today. That's a space where we're working to actually use the federal funding. We get about $6 million of federal planning funds every year, and a whole lot more of federal capital funds every year, that this body is looking to put some of that resource towards exploring what different strategies can look like that might be workable across all of those different municipal and other agency interests. And so this report I've been talking about was one of the first steps that body took to say, we're going to put funds and money towards exploring this challenge together. And that's why we produced this report and are excited to sort of talk about it and then go into the next phase that we're going to also fund through federal planning funds in the coming year to look at what it takes to operationalize different strategies. But I think that one of the keys, starting with, there are a range of potential solutions, and there are a range of levels at which you can implement them. And to be able to open up the conversation from having one potential solution to having a range of them and figuring out what is a good fit for the region as a whole and the different interests that are there is what is really essential, because you all can agree on goals and what the issues are, but not every solution is as obvious to everybody as the right solution. So let's explore those together, sort of the perspective of the MPO, and try to figure out what those can look like. So that's my sort of where people are a little willing to have a conversation in regional space, I think we can have sort of some productive outcomes in terms of an exploration of feasible implementation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Council President. And I just had one last question, so I don't even think I'll need to set a timer, but I represent a lot of communities that are close to transit-rich neighborhoods, you know, the West End, Beacon Hill, Back Bay, Fenway, and Mission Hill. And we know that some of the most walkable, some of the most amenity-filled areas are often the most expensive to live in, including a lot of places in my district. And it's hard for me to look at this issue without thinking about the housing crisis within, without, you know, that we are in, without thinking about the fact that we have transportation deserts within the city. And, you know, I know the city, and I had a hearing order on this to file something in support of link buses, which would get people around their neighborhoods. Partly those transportation deserts that we are working with and dealing with in the city, needing to go downtown for certain goods and amenities is because you can't find what you need within your own neighborhood, and because you can't get transportation around your own neighborhood. And I'll just give one example of how having all voices at the table is really important. Is I was in a small working group that the city had around Link Bus and around that idea of creating, and I remember saying about West Roxbury, oh, well, West Roxbury, most people have cars, right? So maybe you wouldn't need to have a link bus that gets around. And then in speaking with the counselor for the area, I found out that there are a lot of seniors that live in West Roxbury that may actually really enjoy access to things within that last square mile in their neighborhood. So while we're having this conversation with experts from around the country, and while we're having sort of this big conversation around congestion pricing and around it as, you know, there's also these things that are just so specific to Boston. And I did appreciate everyone's testimony today because, you know, especially Professor Manville, when he said, you know, you would need to make this work for your community. I think that's so accurate. And Boston is its own, you know, we're 23 neighborhoods. We have such, you know, I can only claim to know the 5 that I represent. And so, so I'm really grateful for everyone's time. I think this has been a really productive conversation. I do want to let us close with the sponsor having a chance to give a final statement, and then any last questions that you have, Councilor Fernandez-Anderson. And then if anyone has a very short second round or has any closing comments on the council, feel free to raise your hand after Councilor Fernandez-Anderson speaks. And then I'll give each lightning round of the panelists a chance just to say a few words after that. So thank you. On to Councilor Fernandez-Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to all the participants today. I think this has been a really important discussion, for obvious reasons. I filed this in terms of, you know, implementing or possibly implementing congestion pricing. I did get a lot of emails, both positive and concerns and negative, all the above. And today we've heard a variety of perspectives, right? And it's really clear the potential benefits, obviously, of congestion pricing. And the benefits are substantial. It can reduce traffic congestion, improve air quality, and generate much needed funds for our public transportation system. And these benefits can contribute to creating more livable, sustainable, and equitable city. I did, you know, in terms of like just closing out, I wanted to specifically, of course, thank all my panelists, Jared, Adi, Professor Manville, and Tegan. Vineet, thank you so much for your contribution today. But it does feel like, in terms of Boston Regional MPO, there are a lot. We brought you a lot of resources, and Vineet, I wanted to ask you finally, are you already working with any of the panelists here, or do you plan on working with them in the future? And then, of course, for my panelists, if there are things that I've missed or points that we, the council, have not brought up today, in terms of next steps, considering that there needs to be there's so much work to be done, and some of my colleagues you heard today are not prepared to take a position or in opposition, and some are supportive. And some have expressed, I think Council Fitzgerald mentioned, in terms of like, it sounds like this is a workshop, right? Like, how do we figure out the specific individual plan? How are we thoughtful about it to mitigate any, regression, or making sure that we're not adversely impacting those of lower socioeconomic status? And so from the panelists, I guess, your opinion, your suggestions in terms of steps, next best steps moving forward, considering all that you've heard here today. And Vineet,
Sure.
question. Thank you.
Thanks for the invite. We really appreciate it on behalf of the administration. We have been working with Tegan and her team at the Boston MPO. The kind of holistic approach that they have, we think, is very conducive to this discussion. So congestion is just not road pricing. It's a bunch of other tools that work with that. So we'll continue to remain engaged with the Boston MPO. We also are looking at what the Governor's Task Force on Transportation Funding is discussing. And so those are two arenas that we'll be very active in. Thank you again for inviting the administration to the conversation, and we'll remain very engaged.
Thank you so much. To my panelists, if you could suggest, next steps. Obviously, I do feel that, there needs to be continued conversation and partnership with transportation or the administration in terms of moving forward. This is a hearing, obviously not a resolution, not an ordinance. If I had it my way, I think I would move forward to asking my colleagues to take a position. Now that we've held the hearing, for those who are absent, then asking them for a possible working session or a meeting so that they can be more educated on the topic and make a decision or take a position on it. And then at least messaging the state that, where the council is, the city of Boston's council is on this issue. Anyone can start. I can go in a circle. Adi, you're first on my screen.
Sure. If I could offer one thing, which I can imagine how naturally explosive it might sound from the New York example we just went through, but just through, as the theme for at least me today has been clearly oriented around political economy, states are just so powerful in the United States transportation governance system, particularly from a fiscal perspective. And they naturally, per the council president's excellent questions on regionalism, Tegan knows that's something we're passionate about too, they kind of deliver there too. So I just, again, making sure they're both at the table, even just in quiet formats, right, in those kind of private meetings, to make sure, because they have the institutional assets to really help you deliver on something that not just works for central Boston, I mean, in the city sense, but actually the entire MSA of Boston, and continues to make sure that this is, again, as it's been, one of the most competitive regional economies in the country. So this is something that can help deliver, and they probably have an important seat at the table going forward.
Thank you. We have been collaborating with the state. Our office have had several conversations, and they agreed that this conversation was necessary as well. Thank you. Professor?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with 80. I guess and also something that you already said a number of times. I guess I would just second that, which is this is going to take a while, and this, no one should anticipate this as a process, and nor would we necessarily want it, where it's like, you put the switch and you have to get the pricing. So you're going to have to lay a lot of groundwork with constituents, with the state, depending on how you do it, with your congressional representatives. And yeah, just kind of, and I think the example of New York shows, be ready to be sued. I think one reason why the governor did what she did is that she just thought one of these 8 lawsuits was going to finish it off anyways, and so she escaped unscathed, but she just did it. It is This is a general is an idea I support. I like congestion pricing, but it's always important to remember that we are in a regulatory environment where we have a system that's designed to stop things, and this is no exception. So I think, just always be aware of that.
Thank you. Jared?
Yes, I would look at some of the work that Seattle DOT did. Seattle DOT did a report on, what congestion pricing would look like, and also did, I think importantly, did some of the work to identify what some of the mitigations would be. And so I think doing an exercise where you sort of say, okay, if congestion pricing was our preferred method, what would that look like? And also just start to get some of that data that I think is really important about what's the current impact to City of Boston residents, especially low-income residents, of the current congestion, how many of them are driving downtown, and then to also look at, I believe it was, I'm sorry, it was the chair brought up around sort of amenities lacking in different neighborhoods, and so identifying what are those amenities and start to develop that and make sure that that's in the city's capital plan. But I think, looking at that Seattle DOT example and other U.S. cities that have done reports on congestion pricing would be a great place to start.
Thank you. Tegan?
Thanks. So for us as staffing this regional collaborative body with funding behind it, our next step, and I think that this is relevant for you all, is we want to really work on building the more locally contextually, the kind of the local context and the body of knowledge around congestion pricing. So like Jared said, there are things that different cities have done, research that different entities have done, but we really need to understand the potential application of those strategies in the Boston context. And then when I say Boston, I'm saying Boston region in this case, which of course includes the city of Boston itself, as well as the other 96 cities and towns in our region. So our next step is to take that and pivot using the federal funding we have available in the interest of our board to understand better the range of options and their applicability in the Boston context. So that's the next phase of work that we're doing that I think is important. Back to the political will question, our role is to work to build a body of knowledge and analysis and support using these immensely powerful tools that we have as an agency. We have a lot of data scientists, data analysts, we have travel demand models, access to a ton of different kinds of data. We want to build up the understanding of what these strategies can look like in the Boston region so that the elected officials and the decision makers have a better body of work to go to when you're having discussions like these, help and make informed decisions, data-driven decisions. So that's our continued next step, is to continue to build that data-driven understanding of the potential impacts. But we'd be looking at things like a comprehensive stakeholder analysis for the Boston region, understanding, we had some initial conversations with our board around goal setting and the different kinds of metrics and data that we would need to be able to talk to the ability of a strategy to actually accomplish those goals. We have a commitment to use some funding from our board to look at the potential operationalizing of various strategies and looking at the impact on equity populations and the impacts on other potential challenges like diversions. And we have tools that we can do to start to explore that. So back to other comments made, these things do take a long time. And I appreciate, folks wanting to take advantage of political will and capital in the moment. And in the meantime, we can continue to build the sort of understanding of the Boston context and the applicability of these strategies to help support your decision making.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really glad that we had this conversation early on. It feels early, but obviously it needs to happen. It's one of those things that if you keep postponing, then when is it going to happen? I'm obviously very interested in congestion pricing as a solution. So things can have manifested itself either way, right? Like whether the research is taking place and then the conversation, or you educate the council here in this conversation, and then we're continuing collaboration and partnership with the administration, then your collaboration, obviously. And I do appreciate your lengthy and arduous research and work that you have to do on the ground. Obviously, engaging community could take a lot. So thank you all for your work. Please lean into my office for any future conversations and collaborations. And Vineet, obviously looking forward to continuing collaboration with your office as well.
Thank you so much to our panelists. I do see that Councilor Mejia is raising her hand. So Councilor Mejia, do you want to do any final remarks?
Yeah, well, it's maybe it could be a question or it might just be a remark. You never know when I speak here, but surprise. I am curious, for me, I am always looking at who's in the Zoom or in the room and who is not, right? And I think as we continue to have these conversations, Tijan, I'm sure that, I'm probably just meeting you now. I'm very interested in making sure that stakeholders and the voices of folks are gonna, particularly low-income communities and people of color, when it comes to climate, when it comes to transit, when it comes to all those things, we tend to be way out of the conversation, but we're the ones who have the most to lose and or benefit from. So as we continue to have these working sessions or dialogues, please reach out to my office so that I can help support and connect you all with some folks who have never even heard of congestion pricing, who have never heard of any of these things, because all of this oftentimes for me, even though I've been here for 4 years, a lot of this is about privilege, because while there are some folks right now who are dodging bullets and are too afraid to get on their bikes, we are talking about bike lanes. So for me, as someone who is deeply rooted in community, I want to make sure that as we continue to navigate these conversations, that we're always looking at opportunities to engage folks who don't have the privilege to understand this as a context, as a strategy, as whatever, because I feel like we can all learn and we all have something to offer. And I think listening to some folks who really don't know much about congestion pricing, to have them at the table could also inform your thinking and how you are positioning this work. And I think that is an ingredient that is missing in this dialogue, and I'd like to just offer that those stakeholders and those voices are included, particularly the small businesses too, because they're thinking about their food delivery, they're thinking about whether or not they're going to have to increase their prices, and all of this, fear that anytime we talk about increasing a tax or anything, everyone just goes into the automatic how this is going to impact whether or not I'm going to be able to put food on the table. And I think that fear is real for folks who don't have the privilege of not living check to check. And so if there's anything that I can offer to this conversation is to just make sure that you continue to think about the people who are worried the most about whether or not they're going to be able to feed their families. That is really something that I think is important for me to underscore here. Sorry, I was not on camera. For me to underscore as we continue to go on this journey. So I'm excited to have the dialogue and to be a thought partner in what that work will look like. And I have political will, and I'm here to use my political capital however we see fit. And I want to make sure that I'm also being responsive to the people that I know that worry the most about what this could mean to their families.
Thank you so much, Councilor Mejia. And I think this has been a really great conversation and a lot of great panelists. Thank you again to Councilor Tanya Fernandez-Anderson for all the work you put into getting the right people here. I did want to open this up for public testimony. Shane, is there anyone from the public that would like to testify today?
Hi, Madam Chair. I don't have anybody right now.
Okay, great. Seeing no other hands raised, this working session on docket 0357 is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.